66.
6640.
Your future lies in 6640.
66 books by 40 authors, and yet we now discover it's an integrated message system from outside our time domain.
Welcome to 6640, the ministry outreach of Koinonia House and Koinonia Institute. Today's Bible teacher is Chuck Missler, connecting the Bible to your life and the world around you. In today's study, Chuck continues his teaching on the book of Habakkuk.
Most of our social changes are brought about by court decision, not laws voted on. Busing, affirmative action, elevation and promotion of sexual perversion. All those things derive from our court processes, not from the legislature. That's a violation of the separation of powers, actually, and on and on and on. Have you ever wondered why governments always seem to tend toward corruption? As a systems engineer, I never understood that until I got this diagram I'm about to show you. I didn't understand. I realized it, and yet I don't understand why. Why do governments tend to get corrupt? Why are we surprised? Governments have always loved crises. Why? Well, crises provide the rationale for two things: increasing budgets and bureaucracies, obviously, and also for subjugating the liberties of the population. Every time your liberties are lost, it's always some very worthwhile banner. It's to solve some apparent crisis. We've got to institute these things. Okay. See, in dictatorships, dictators understand this. They always create external crises to consolidate their internal powers. When a dictator comes over, he's got to create a crisis to consolidate his own hold on what's going on. Okay. Now, in our country, we've long learned that social crises work just as well as military ones. The war on poverty, whatever. No child left behind. They always have. There's one insight that supplies the key missing link that I never realized. If social crises, if governments are favored by social crises, how do you get social crises? By promoting immorality. Immorality results in social crises. Okay? So let's diagram the dynamic here. Governments love military crises. Why? Because they increase budgets and so forth, right? Well, it turns out that social crises work just as well. The social crisis will increase budget and give you bureaucracy, hire more people, whatever. Well, how do you get social crises? From immorality. Now I understand. That's why governments promote immorality, because that will produce the social crises that allow governments to grow. And guess what happens? That's what happens. Everything grows bigger. More immorality, more social crisis, bigger budgets, more government, more immorality, and on it goes. From 1963 on, you've got the free sex, and you've got the shredding of the home and the family, and you can go build your list. Anyway, now going back to Habakkuk, if an organism or a country cannot deal with its infections quickly and effectively, it will die of infection. So in Jerusalem, too, they could not deal with it, justice and equity fairly, quickly, and simply. If they had, it would have been repairable. No. Habakkuk 1 verse 5. Behold ye among the heathen and regard and wonder marvelously, God speaking, for I will work a work in your days which ye will not believe, though it be told you. What a fabulous verse. No wonder Paul quotes it so articulately in Acts 13. Behold and regard and wonder marvelously, for I will work a work in your days which you will not believe, even though I told you. I wonder how much that's going to be true in our life. I wonder how much of the next few months or few years are things that we can read about today if we knew where to look. Behold ye among the heathen. Who is he talking about here? This verse anticipates, but this is an interesting verse because this verse anticipates dispersion of the Jews among the heathen. Habakkuk is talking to the Jews. But behold ye among the heathen. He's anticipating that they're going to be dispersed. And he's not talking about Babylon. He's talking about a dispersion later. What we're going to get confused by is he's going to get some things that are near and some things that are further, and they get commingled sometimes. Let's watch for that. While Israel as a nation is thus dispersed, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, if I use the rabbinical phrase, will work a work which Israel will not believe. No kidding. Isn't that right? Paul quotes this to the Jews of the dispersion at Antioch. It's Acts 13, attributing the prediction to the redemptive work of Christ. Paul applies it that way. This verse he applies there, and it goes even beyond there, as we'll see. There's a concept of prophetic perspectives you need. A prophet may see two different things in the same glimpse. He sees an early event, and it echoes in advance a later event. And there is a time gap between these two, like two hills that are separated, but they're in a distance, so you're not sensitive to the distance between them. The first one we call a type. The following one we call an antitype, which is simply something that is anticipated in a type. But prophecy is full of these. Some people call it a double fulfillment. It's got all kinds of labels, and most of those labels are misleading. But the point is, this is a phenomenon that we see in the prophetic literature. The early event, a time gap, eclipsing a larger event later. And we're going to see that all the way through here. We're going to see a regathering of Babylon. After they're going into Babylon, they get promised to be regathered. But the regathering promise also talks about their being regathered from the entire world, which is what we're seeing happen in our lifetime. Okay. Let's continue with verse 5. Behold ye among the heathen, and regard and wonder marvelously, for I will work a work in your days which you will not believe, though it be told you. What does that really mean? Don't count God out. Stand back and watch, God is saying. Okay? He deals with the worldwide dispersion in verse 5. He's going to deal with the impending captivity of Babylon in the next verse. That's what, if you're not paying attention, it's easy to get confused here. Okay. Probably at this time, Babylon was still friendly with them, in 2 Kings 20, and they visited Hezekiah. And Hezekiah, that was back in the days of Hezekiah. And he did a stupid thing. He showed them all his treasures, bragging. That's like showing, the neighborhood thief the neat places you've hidden all your valuables in your house. Let me show you where I got all this good stuff. Oh, really? Let me take notes, Okay. 3 sieges will follow from Jehoiakim, Jehoiachin, and Zedekiah. And we covered that in the pre-brief on here. See, God bypasses our puny understanding. He's going to deal with all this. Habakkuk seems to apply, try me. Okay, verse 6. For lo, I raise up the Chaldeans. See, he switched, not the whole world. I was talking about the Chaldeans, the Babylonians coming. I will raise up the Chaldeans, that bitter and hasty nation, which shall march through the breadth of the land to possess the dwelling places that are not theirs. In other words, they're going to come in conquest, the Chaldeans. They're the inhabitants of Babylonia, of Semitic origin, and so on. In 626, Nabopolassar, who's the king of Babylon, came to the throne. In 606, within 20 years, his son Nebuchadnezzar defeated Pharaoh Necho at the Battle of Carchemish and established the Neo-Babylonian Empire of Daniel chapter 2. Assyria by then had become irrelevant. They were the power in the neighborhood. And Habakkuk, God tells Habakkuk, they are terrible and dreadful. Their judgment and their dignity shall proceed of themselves, out of their own pride. They're arrogant, in other words. Their horses are swifter than the leopards. They pioneered cavalry. Others had chariots, but they used cavalry in a very innovative way. That's one reason they got very powerful. Anyway, their horses swifter than leopards. They are more fierce than the evening wolves. Their horsemen shall spread themselves. Their horsemen shall come from afar. They shall fly as the eagle that hasteth to eat. They shall come up for all violence. Their faces shall sup up as the east wind, and they shall gather the captivity as the sand. And they shall scoff at the kings, and the princes shall be a scorn to them. They shall deride every stronghold, for they shall heap dust and take it. In other words, exploiting bulwarks to capture walled cities is the allusion here. Heap dust meaning that's their way of breaching a walled city. And then shall his mind change, and he shall pass over and offend, imputing this his power unto his God. Now this is a classic passage for the characteristics of the Chaldeans. Just as Isaiah 5 was for the Assyrians, there's a good parallel here, but anyway, God is already preparing the Chaldeans to be his rod of punishment. And that's going to confuse Habakkuk even further. I mean, we're supposed to be the good guys, and you God are going to use these mean ruffians to be your instrument of judgment? Yeah. And they'll get theirs later, is the point. Anyway, Then his mind shall change, and so forth. Fulfillment of Moses' warning in Deuteronomy 28. The purpose of the invaders is to perpetuate violence in the land, and this was Israel's sin, and it will be her punishment. She perpetuates violence, violence is going to be her meat. Feinberg says, for one to make his own strength his God is to commit suicide of the soul. There are times Feinberg is really quite eloquent. I like that. Art thou not from everlasting, O Lord, my God, my Holy One? We shall not die. He's right about that. O Lord, thou hast ordained them for judgment. And Almighty God, thou hast established them for correction. He doesn't understand. Thou art of purer eyes than to behold evil, and canst not look on iniquity. Wherefore lookest thou upon them that deal treacherously, and holdest thy tongue when the wicked devoureth the man that is more righteous than he? See, the Babylonians are wiping out people that are less unrighteous as the wipeouts, but the point is that's still God's judgment. And makest men as the fishes of the sea, as the creeping things that have no ruler over them. They take up all of them with the angle. They catch them in their net, and they gather them in their drag. Therefore they rejoice and are glad. Therefore they sacrifice unto their net, they burn incense unto their drag, because by them their portion is fat, and their meat plenteous. Shall they therefore empty their net, and not spare continually to slay the nations? See, Habakkuk is really struggling here. He's saying, God, you can't be serious. You can't use them. They're even worse than we are. Wow. Yet he knows the nature of a covenant-keeping God who will not allow his people to be wiped out. He knows they're not going to be wiped out, and yet he's puzzled by what's going on here. God's going to protect them as he does in the Magog invasion and in the days of Esther. You a lot of examples where God, either openly or behind the scenes, is protecting his people. And we're going to see how he deals with Habakkuk's questions in chapter 2. Are you ready? Let's go to chapter 2. Okay? I will stand upon my watch, and set me upon the tower, and I will watch to see what he will say unto me, and what I shall answer when I am reproved. Now, this isn't necessarily a literal tower. It can be, but that's the real point. It's the state of mind. Habakkuk's going to stand back and watch and try to understand what's going on here. Chapter 2 is Hezekiah and his tower. Prophets are compared to watchmen in a number of places. We don't have to chase those down. There's three key components to Habakkuk's posture here. First, determination. He didn't say maybe next week or when it's convenient I'll find the time. No. He did it right now. Secondly, he got in isolation, away from all the distractions. He turned off the radio, the TV, the telephone. We often can't hear the voice of God because there's too many other voices that are constantly ringing in our ears. So what we're looking at here, the tower is a quiet time, a quiet place, and perhaps most important, a quiet heart. That's what Habakkuk's doing, and that's what our call should be. And then the third part is expectation. Habakkuk says, I will see what the Lord will say to me. Not might, hope, or I wish. No, I will see. Don't say, I hope I'll see. I might see. I wish he'd tell me. No. He's determined. He's isolated. He has, I will see what the Lord will say to me. Okay. There are many ways to please God, but never apart from faith. That's Hebrews 11:6. If you haven't memorized it, you need to do that. Let's go on, verse 2. And the Lord answered me and said, write the vision, make it plain upon the tables, that he may run that readeth it. God's saying, Habakkuk, you're ready to do business. Take a memo. Okay? That he may run that readeth it. In other words, as a messenger of the vision. By the way, are you really serious when you pray with God? How many of you pray to God? How many think you're serious when you pray to God? Next question, you don't have to show me your hands. How many of you take a pad? When you go before God, do you take a pad and pencil? If you've ever been in a large organization, have you ever seen an executive secretary go into the boss's office without a pad? Never. A professional secretary, if he calls quickly, she'll grab a pad. She never goes in there without a pad. Always prepared for an assignment or some numbers or something to follow through on. Do you seek the Lord with paper and pencil in your hand? Question. Don't have to show me your hands. Does an executive secretary ever enter a boss's office? So think about that. I watch my wife. She never, in her devotions and prayer, she's always got a pad and she's got a journal and she really tracks that stuff. I won't lie about what I do. We'll just go on. Verse 3, for the vision is yet for an appointed time, and at the end of it shall speak and not lie. Though it tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come, it will not tarry. In other words, God's saying, be patient, don't panic. God has set a bound to all which displeases him. Is America exporting everything that God abhors? Absolutely. How long do you think that'll last? There is a point where even God will say enough already. Behold, his soul which is lifted up is not upright in him, but the just shall live by his faith. Now, by the way, we've just stumbled into what has to be one of the most profound verses in the entire Bible. Habakkuk 2:4. It deals with two groups of people. Many people miss this. Those whose soul is lifted up. Don't think they're saved. Those are the ones that are not saved. Those whose soul is lifted up is not upright in him. And those who live by faith. Whose soul is not upright? The Babylonians' pride. The pride leads to death because it will not receive by faith the grace of God. Look at their leader, Nebuchadnezzar. He stands on the wall and brags how he did all this, and he gets struck down for 7 years? By the way, when we're in heaven, I believe we'll see him there. At the end of 7 years, he posts his testimony throughout the entire known world. It's called Daniel chapter 4. It was written by Nebuchadnezzar. Read it sometime. It's fabulous. The Talmud declares 613 precepts given by God to Moses on Mount Sinai are there summarized. And I can't recall why I added this note. It was supposed to remind me about something, but I'm drawing a blank right now. Senility is a humbling thing, so we'll just move on. Okay. The vision. To the watching prophet comes the vision with three elements, and that's what's going to constitute the rest of this chapter. The moral judgment of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh on the evils of dispersed Israel, the future purpose of God that the earth shall be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. Wow. That's in verse 14. And meanwhile, the just shall live by faith. Now, who are the just? What is the word just? Tzaddik. Just, lawful, righteous. In government, judge, right in one's cause, just and righteous in conduct and character. Righteous is justified and vindicated by God. You can hammer this all you like. You can't escape this pure idea of what is just, lawful, or righteous. Okay, so far? The just shall live. The word chaya, it's to live, to have life, remain alive, sustain life, live prosperously, live forever, be quickened, be alive, restored. These are all out of lexicons. To cause to grow, to cause to revive, to preserve man alive, to quicken, revive, or restore to health, to revive or restore to life. Okay. By what? By faith. Emunah. Firmness, fidelity, steadfastness, steadiness. It's not some vacant belief structure. No, it's a concept of reliance, relying on. The devils also believe and tremble, James reminds us. Just believing isn't the point. It's relying on it. And what are you believing in? What are you relying on? Emunah, by faith, not by intellect, sight, or feelings or touch. Faith is the currency of eternity, and God wants us to be rich people. We need to be weaned, of course. The just shall live by faith. I want to take this phrase and focus on it very carefully because it'll give you a huge illumination of the New Testament. That phrase, the just shall live by faith, appears in Romans chapter 1, verse 17. It's the key verse of the book of Romans because the epistle to the Romans, Paul defines justification. Who are the just? Romans is the book that nails it. Okay, the just shall do what? The just shall live by faith. That appears in Galatians 3:11. The just shall live. How shall they live? That's what the Galatians epistle talks about. Not living by religious externalism, but by walking in the Spirit. The just shall live by what? By faith. And that's in Hebrews 10:38. Each Romans, Galatians, and Hebrew are a trilogy on Habakkuk 2:4. And you'll understand those epistles if you understand the central theme of each epistle. Who are the just? How shall they live? And by what? By faith. And by the way, Hebrews 10:38 is the verse just before the famous hall of faith, as we call it, Hebrews chapter 11. Do you see a design here? Now the point is, Paul wrote this trilogy on Habakkuk 2:4, which, among other things, tells you who wrote the epistle to Hebrews. I'm stunned to discover, when I did the Hebrews commentary, I studied so many of these commentaries who spent all their time, did Paul really write it? No, it was really this guy or that guy, for which there's no evidence, by the way. And the ones that dwell on the authorship of the epistle miss the point of the epistle, by the way. They get all hung up on that. They seem to, what it's really all about goes right by them. So it was our Hebrews commentary was kind of fun because once you recognize the realities, it's clear why he's writing, what he's writing, to whom he's writing, and what it says. It's all very clear. Anyway, moving on. The impact of this little verse I want to talk about. In 1483, in Eisleben, Saxony, a baby boy was born to a poor coal miner. He observed the poverty, so he decided he didn't want that, so he decided to be a lawyer. But in 1501, he entered the University of Erfurt, where he excelled in his studies. However, at the end of his schooling, he got caught in a terrifying storm, during which he made a vow that if he survived that, he would become a monk. He survived the thing, so he's good to his word. He entered an Augustinian monastery. Instead of going into law, he went into theology and got a doctorate. But the more he studied, the more troubled he became about his own sin. It became an obsession to him. And he indulged in the most extreme forms of self-punishment. And that was very characteristic of the church in those days, the medieval church. But even going through all that, he could never find peace. Finally, in 1509, he decided to make a pilgrimage to Rome to try to get his questions answered. But he's on foot. And as he crosses the Alps, he almost dies of a high fever. In a monastery there, they nursed him back to health. But while in the monastery, a wise monk, recognizing his frustrations with these issues, says, you need to read the book of Habakkuk, because he's troubled, about this whole issue of sin. And there's one verse that leapt out at him from Habakkuk, chapter 2, verse 4. The just shall live by faith. He was haunted by that. He couldn't get it out of his mind. He finally does go to Rome, but he's disgusted with what he finds there. He actually abandons all the reasons he went there. He returns back to the University of Wittenberg, goes on to explore the revolutionary idea of justification by faith that was pointed to him by Habakkuk 2:4, but of course is the central doctrine of the Epistle of Romans. So he ultimately nailed his famous 95 Theses to the door at Wittenberg Castle Church and started a movement that's known today as the Reformation. One of the most important events in modern history from a verse, Habakkuk 2:4. At the diet of worms, now that's a strange phrase. The diet is not a diet, it's a council. The diet of worms is the council of a town. The town is worms, the diet is the ruling class in the town of worms. And they excommunicated this guy, whose name is Martin Luther, obviously, as a heretic. He went on to write commentaries that are classics today. He wrote a lot of hymns like Mighty Fortresses Are God. He translated the entire Bible into German, which remains today as a classic in the Germanic language. So, all because of a little verse that changed the course of history. Okay, let's move on. Now follows a fivefold woe, 5 woes, if you will, upon the wicked Chaldean oppressor, the Babylonians that are coming. This is going to be presented symmetrically in 5 stanzas or strophes of 3 verses each. You ready for this? The Holy Spirit, from time to time, gets very structured. Other times, he's very free-flowing, but it's interesting. But verses 5 through 8 are first going to deal with proud ambition. Then they're going to deal, next few verses, each one of the groups of 3, covetousness, ruthlessness and cruelty, debauchery, and idolatry. Sounds like a list of movies to see tonight, right? Okay. Moving on. Verse 5. Yea, also because he transgressed by wine, he is a proud man, neither keeping at home, who enlarges his desire as hell or Sheol, and is as death and cannot be satisfied, but gathers unto him all nations, and heapeth unto him all people. This is this oppressor that's coming, whose appetites are impossible to satiate. In fact, he's saying, trust me, they'll never be satisfied. Nothing satisfies prominence, position, power, or people. They are never reach a level of satisfaction. God thirst drives us. Wine. Nahum, the prophet Nahum makes it clear that Assyria fell through drunkenness. Amos tells us the fall of the northern kingdom was caused by drunkenness. Now Habakkuk tells us that Babylon will fall through their drunkenness. Interesting. Rome did also. What about us? Do we drink a lot of alcohol? Boy, that's just the beginning of it, isn't it? Shall not these make up a parable against him and a taunting proverb against him and say, Woe to him that increaseth that which is not his? How long? And to him that ladeth himself with thick clay. Now you have a little trouble with that last phrase probably. To him that ladeth himself with thick. They kept their loan records on clay tablets. What this is really saying, it maketh himself rich with loans. Now you don't pick that up until you understand that thick clay was an allusion to their legal records, so to speak. Shall they not rise up suddenly that shall bite thee and that shall vex thee, and thou shalt be for booties unto them? And these bad guys that are coming, taking over, he's predicting that they're going to fall too, see? Medo-Persia forms an alliance that took over Babylon by drying up the river Euphrates, taking it over. That's all recorded in Daniel chapter 5. Cyrus takes over and frees them. That's what ended the Babylonian captivity. And here, Habakkuk is anticipating that in the rhetoric of his prophecies here.
You've been listening to 6640, the ministry outreach of Koinonia House and Koinonia Institute. Today's Bible teacher was Chuck Missler, teaching through the book of Habakkuk. Download the new K-House TV app to access an ever-growing collection of free resources. Visit the Apple or Android App Store, or search K-House TV on your Roku or Fire TV streaming device. Thank you for listening to 6640 and for your continued prayerful support of this ministry. Until next time, as we continue this series, may God bless you with the knowledge of His Son, Jesus Christ, as you study His Word.